of the E1, so we call it principle in EU member states. So first I will show you the parts of the indicator. So we have certain criteria, the methodology behind the composite indicator, then the second part, assessment of the E1 principle in the NECPs and what data sources, and then the results, and followed by a bit discussion and outlook. So why would you develop such indicator-based approach? So the E1 principle is a relative new concept, so no assessment so far exists. Indicators such in this approach could improve the understanding of the E1 principle and guide countries to assess what they have implemented so far and what is still open. The aim of the indicator is this should be applicable across different countries and straightforward and quite simple, and it's a qualitative approach so far. So for that, we have developed a set of 13 indicators you see on the right-hand side, which are gathered in 5 main categories: policy-making process, removal of barriers, challenges, regional and local level, and monitoring. And this is combined to a composite indicator. So first, the E1 principle in policy making process. So the E1 principle requires the recognition of energy efficiency as a flexible input and should be considered on par with alternative resources. So for that, we have 5 indicators. So the comparison of supply and demand side solutions. So do member states, for example, in the NECPs, compare these supply and demand side solutions? Then the application of the systematic cost-benefit analysis. So do they apply CBA in their assessment of policies and scenarios? Then how do they apply discount rates? Do they apply one discount rate for both supply and demand side options, or do they have differences in these discount rates? Then are multiple benefits of some kind included in their assessment, and do they also include economic energy efficiency potentials in their policy design, for example? Then category 2 is the removal of market barriers. So in the past there was a preference for supply side investments, and this resulted in deep-seated market barriers to end-use energy efficiency investments. So to measure this, we have 4 indicators. So prevention of market distortions. So are there preferences for subsidies to fossil fuels and infrastructure? Then how is the access to capital? So for the energy efficiency investments, how is the access for the implementer to information? So information is always important for implementing energy efficiency measures. And last but not least, the risk and uncertainty. So are there policies which can provide regulatory stability and so on? Then we have 3, 4, and 5 category. So the consideration of challenges to EE, so energy efficiency. These are, in our approach, energy poverty as a more and more interesting topic in the EU, and the most recent developments also reflected in sufficiency as a challenge. So also the E1 principle should be applied to regional and local level. So we assess here in this category, is there such application on a local or regional level? Then also the last point is the monitoring. Is there a verification process? Are measures properly quantified with regards to their effects on energy savings and greenhouse gas emissions? And these are the 4 categories, and these are put together in a normalized composite indicator. So we have the 3 categories. So for each of the certain indicators. So 0 would be no compliance with the indicator, 1 partial compliance, and 2 is a score for full compliance. Then this is aggregated with a weighting method. I will show you the weighting factors later. So this is just a simple additive weighting here to calculate the composite indicator. So, for example, here we have the definitions of these scores. So we applied in our assessment process. So, for example, for the screening process, comparing supply and demand options. So a score of 0 would be given if demand is considered as fixed and is not compared with supply options, and 1 by both supply and demand side options are considered but separate from each other, and 2 would be both demand and supply side solutions are compared in the modeling process. So I won't read all of these as the time is advanced a bit. So you see we have different criteria and have a scoring mechanism for all of these, and combines this to a composite indicator. Here again, the weighting factors, we have applied different weighting factors here for each of the indicators. You see they differ in size, so as reflecting their importance. For example, comparison of supply and demand side options is very important, so it gets a weight of 2. While sufficiency, as is a very new topic and not too much already in the policymaking process, we give it a weight of 1, and also the regional and local level gets a score or weighting factor of 1, as this is very new and not heard of so far. So this could change over time as the implementation of the energy efficiency first principle is advancing in the member states. But for this first approach, we gave this weighting factors. So what data sources did we use? So we designed semi-structured interviews for this process. We gathered interviews from 14 countries in total. We selected the countries depending on the size, geography, and also the energy efficiency performance. So on the right-hand side, you see 30% were research institutions, 60% of interviewees were from national energy agencies. These were mostly from the ODYSSEE-MURE network. So as there are mostly national energy agencies, this is no surprise, and 10% by consultancies. Secondly, we also screened the NECPs for how is the energy efficiency first principle mentioned, is this a description of implementation, and so on. And then also we used the ODYSSEE-MURE database for energy efficiency indicators and also policies. As we have introduced a new descriptor in the MURE database, we can also screen how many energy poverty targeting policies are implemented in the EU, and also are there any sufficiency measures implemented by now. So these were the 3 main data sources. This could also be extended over time, as now only half of the EU is covered, and also more than 1 or 2 interviewees per country, and different institutions could be included in this indicator in the future. So how did the member states perform in the different categories? So, for example, in the policymaking process, we see that all countries consider energy efficiency as a resource on its own, so this is good. Countries, however, still lack a systematic approach, so this is room for improvement. And only Ireland compares its measures and policies with the economic energy efficiency potentials of a certain sector. Removal of market barriers. So apart from France, member states do not systematically reverse past policies and measures and correct existing imbalances. The majority of countries provides measures to overcome financial and informational barriers, but there's still a lack of removing the risk and uncertainty here to a larger degree, as we see here that many countries have scored 0 here. Then category 3, the consideration of the challenges. So we see, as said, that sufficiency especially is a very new topic, and this has not reached this political sphere by now. But energy poverty is more and more becoming a popular topic, and this is implemented by almost half of the countries already. Then the regional and local adaptation of the E1 principle, we see that on the governmental level, this is implemented, but no local and regional entity has formally incorporated the E1 principle. So there is also room for improvement, and as well for the monitoring and verification process. So we see that the quality of monitoring methods and coverage varies mostly across sectors and programs, and is not very well implemented in the member states so far. So outlook and conclusion. So all member states consider already energy efficiency as a resource on its own, but this means that the overall principle is understood, but not fully implemented by the member states. So the member states still fail to guarantee an equal playing field between demand and supply side options, mostly due to subsidies for supply side and fossil fuels. The provision of a guideline on the E1 principle might support member states to implement all aspects of the E1 principle and to ensure that energy efficiency comes first and at all government levels. As I said, the weights for the indicator approach should be adjusted over time so that its validity is improved. And last but not least, we have implemented these indicators in a E1 facility. You might visit already on the ODYSSEE-MURE website. It will be released on the website in a few days, but by using this link, you could also have a look on how the single countries perform and have a deeper look on the methods and also additional material behind that approach. And if you have any questions so far or in the future, feel free to contact me or ask now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthias. So I don't see questions in the chat, but I would have one from you. Did you have already the opportunity to discuss this assessment with member states or with stakeholders?
We discussed this a bit on the last ODYSSEE-MURE meeting, where, of course, some would mention that the coverage is not yet perfect, and of course other stakeholders in the countries should be also included in the indicator approach. But for now, this is not really discussed with member states in detail. But we address these issues mentioned already in the future and try to extend the coverage and also to include more and more views on this. So also we wouldn't like to go for too much governmental institutions, as they might have a different view and distort a bit their view. But yes, we would like to include more stakeholders in the future.
Thanks, Matthias. I see that, Romain, you are raising your hand if you want to ask a question, but please keep it short if possible. You're muted for the moment, so we don't hear you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
And please introduce yourself.
Romain, I'm currently looking at founding an innovative company in energy efficiency in France. The question for Matthias is regarding the comment vis-à-vis France and the measures and the correction of those measures. I think it was maybe point number 4. If you could elaborate a bit on that, please.
It's later here.
Later in the yes, this one, yes. The comment regarding France, I'm not sure I got that right.
Yes, so it seems I was not part of this interview, but that France reverses also past policies if they don't perform correctly. Maybe Jean-Sébastien can also add on this and correct existing imbalances. Yes, I'm not sure about that in detail. I'm sorry for that, but I did not perform all the interviews by myself.
Well, the idea is that when an evaluation shows that a measure is not successful enough, it can be replaced or it's revised. But yeah, we will need to come back to the interviewees to know about what exact type of policy they were discussing.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Matthias. I'm sorry as we started a bit late, we don't have more time for discussions, and I know you need to leave for another meeting. So thanks a lot for your presentation, and that was also a cooperation between different European projects. So I put you can find in the chat the link to ODYSSEE-MURE. Please mute your mic. I think someone has his mic open. So if you could check and mute your mic. Yes, thanks a lot. And also last month, we did a similar activity to have a joint event with 2 other projects dealing with energy efficiency. First, the Synergies project and Eradata project. And now we are turning to the project which is hosting this webinar, the ENEFIRST project, and I'm welcoming Jan-Erik Hebel from BPIE, who will present the results of the work that has been done on screening policy areas that are relevant for implementing energy efficiency first, and identifying also promising policy approaches for that. So Jan, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Jean-Sébastien, and thank you, Matthias, for presenting this, your work and the indicator. I think it was very interesting. Just to confirm, you can see my slide, I assume?
Yes, it's working fine.
Perfect. So yes, as I will be presenting on the ENEFIRST project. I'm a project manager with BPIE for 2 years now. I'm working on the policy analysis in the ENEFIRST project. I will shortly present with a quick introduction of the project. It might be repetitive for some of you who joined our past workshops, so I will try to make it brief and then dive into more of our outcomes of mainly focused on our latest report on the policy guidelines for implementing efficiency first across member states. So what we did in the ENEFIRST project is we first of all defined the rather high-level principle in practical terms and looked at what has been, how it has been applied in practice in the past in the EU, but also internationally, and through which specific policy approaches it can be implemented in the member states. In a parallel work stream, our colleagues are also assessing and quantifying the potential impacts of efficiency first in an energy system model. And in the end, we analyze policy proposals for the implementation of EFIRST. Our focus is on buildings and the related energy systems, so heating and the power sector. This complements also other Horizon 2020 projects with a broader scope. So some of you know Eradata maybe as well, Synergies, or of course the ODYSSEE-MURE as we just heard about. So for the policy analysis, which is one of our work stream, we identified priority policy areas, assessed the main barriers to EFIRST, and looked at the transferability of international example to the EU context. In the next step, our analysis will move to the national level and also to assess the transferability and potential of implementation on the national level in some member states. We look at Hungary, Spain, and Germany. And as I said, in a parallel work stream, also different stakeholder groups are, of course, consulted about our activities. Just looking at the ENEFIRST team, most of you know Sebastien, our coordinator, of course, from ICP. The policy analysis team consists of BPIE, RAP, and CEU. And our modeling team is centered around Fraunhofer, EC, so Matthias' colleagues, and TU Wien and IRIS. So diving into the principle again, what it actually means, there I will start with our own definition of the ENEFIRST project. We identified the definition based on the existing definitions. We just slightly updated it and said efficiency first gives priority to demand-side resources whenever they are most cost-effective from a societal perspective than investments in energy infrastructure in meeting planning and policy objectives. So, of course, important is the whole system perspective and the consideration of supply and demand-side resources on a level playing field, which you can also see here. So the consideration of energy systems as a whole. Yes, Matthias also just mentioned some multiple benefits that should be considered on supply and demand side. For instance, the reduced greenhouse gas emissions, of course, improved health and comfort. As we're focusing on the building sector, this is really important. Also adding to reduced energy poverty, which is a rising issue on EU level, as it was mentioned before. Yes, and the long-term perspective is really important in our for implementing the efficiency first principle. So not only looking at short-term outcomes, but as the long-term climate neutrality goal in 2050. So I will quickly go through how the energy efficiency first principle has been introduced. So in general EU framework, it was through the EU Energy Union and the governance regulation back in 2018 that set a broad definition of the concept. And it is now, of course, mentioned in some EU legislation, like in the EED, in the EPBD, the electricity market directive. And now with the recast of the EED, the proposal that's on the table with the Fit for 55 package, it now has like a legal basis with the Article 3 that, for instance, requires member states to appoint an entity to monitor the implementation of EFIRST in national policy making. On the more concrete guidance level, which is also important for the implementation of efficiency first, the EU Commission just, of course, published the recommendation and guidelines. So their internal document, not internal, but their document directed to decision makers with more concrete guidance on how to implement the principle. And then we listed again some of the Horizon projects that add to this knowledge base with different focus. On national level, in the end, the transposition and implementation needs to be integrated in existing energy laws, regulation or building codes, and we will hear about this shortly, how this can look in practice. As we focused on the built environment, we identified, as I said, buildings, heating, and the power sector as priority areas and related examples of policy approaches, which you can see here. So for the buildings policy, it can, for example, be the fabric first approach used a lot in Ireland by the Irish Sustainable Energy Agency, or financial incentives for PV or heat pumps that would be linked to a certain energy performance level of the building. So both coordinating energy saving measures at the building level. But I think it's important to mention that this would not mean that renewables and energy efficiency options at the building envelope are competing, but it's more coordination of the measures so that the options are best for the society and for the energy system. So like avoiding an oversized heating system, for example. We also looked at network provisions, taking demand side options into consideration, and dynamic tariffs designed that enable an efficient and flexible use of the electricity that's already there. At the right-hand side, you can see our reports, and if you go to our ENEFIRST website, you can also see all our find all our reports there for further information. What we then discussed is that the implementation of EFIRST in reality does need to follow an integrated approach. So across policy areas, looking at the energy system as a whole. And there can, of course, be different decisions, either at the building level, taking into account the heating system, at the same time with the measures at the building envelope, but also decisions at the broader context regarding public financing of renovation schemes or district level decisions, including, for example, the policy approach we looked at was, for instance, municipal renovation and heat roadmaps. So jointly considering demand reduction in buildings and the heat supply. So this promotion of an integrated approach needs to be implemented across sectors, and this will overcome or help overcome the silo thinking in policymaking and implementation, and would also help policymakers and officers as well as market actors and end users to take each other's, but also the whole system perspective. This, of course, needs to be considered in EU legislation then to enable an integrated energy planning, as it was already done with the ED proposal. So this is a good step in the right direction. I will not go into details about the Fit for 55 package analysis here. You can also we discussed a bit in our report, which you can find on the website. And yes, you can find the link here. So in this report, we adopted this integrated approach in energy planning and energy-related investments, as well as market regulation. I will now quickly dive into both energy planning and energy-related investments. So for energy planning, to consider EFIRST decisions and plans should be based on energy model outcomes, so that the expected impacts from energy efficiency are considered and quantified where possible. So yeah, these outcomes and assessments should be considered in the planning for new infrastructure as well, so that energy efficiency and flexibility potentials are considered on a fair basis. The integrated perspective also needs to be adopted in the national energy and climate plans, which has been done to limited degrees so far, as we heard before, and also in the planning in the building sector. As I said, for instance, in the municipal heat and renovation plans, and we will hear more about these municipal level planning from the Swedish example later on. For the investment decisions for implementing EFIRST, the cost-benefit analysis methodology is really important. Needs to cover a wide scope and enable a holistic assessment of energy efficiency options, which is also now required in the EED recast Article 3. For public funding streams, energy efficiency measures should also prioritize when they are cost-effective and bring more benefits to society, should prioritize energy efficiency measures. This could also be really important for the recovery funds and yes, all public funding streams. For the private sector, for private investments, for instance, for private building owners. Public policies should fill the gap between the investors and the society's perspective. So incentivizing energy performance measures in buildings when they bring more comfort and health benefits to the occupants. And one way to do that is, as I said, the fabric first approach, which I will quickly present as an example from practice. Fabric first means that the building design and renovation aims to maximize the energy performance of the building envelope, so of the components and material of the building fabric, before considering the installation of heating systems and other building services to achieve a really ambitious energy efficiency levels. So this is like a really straightforward implementation of the ENEFIRST principle, which can be either applied directly in building codes or as a general approach in renovation, subsidy schemes, or incentives. We then also developed so-called implementation maps, where we identified barriers to the policy design and implementation, and identified different stakeholder groups which would need to act to overcome those barriers and provide solutions, to analyze the transferability of different policy approaches to the member state level, and sometimes also the local or regional level, to accelerate the implementation of the principle across the EU. So here, as we are a bit limited in time, I will not go through all barriers, but maybe just as an example, for instance, the barrier lack of knowledge and awareness about multiple benefits, as we heard about them quite a bit already, could be overcome by dedicated guidelines on multiple benefits for building owners, and also integrate multiple benefits like the level of comfort, for instance, in the energy performance certificates. Here, of course, the EU institutions could act as stakeholders in the framework of the EPBD, setting new EPC frameworks, or national authorities. Then for the policy implementation, high investments and long payback periods of fabric first energy efficiency measures. This would also require innovative business models and long-term performance guarantees to de-risk investments, or performance-based renovation schemes to overcome lack of monitoring and quality issues in energy efficiency measures. Maybe just so far, if you want to look at some more examples, you'll find different implementation maps of policy approaches on the website. And lastly, we also identified some complementary measures, so preconditions to realize the implementation of ENEFIRST on EU and national level. So first of all, we would need to increase the data availability and digital monitoring to improve trust in energy efficiency measures. Would need to build institutional capacities and raise awareness about the concept and the benefits of energy efficiency. So especially in regional and local authorities, there's often limited capacities and knowledge about the concept, and limited financial and human resources, which would need to be overcome. Then also, as I mentioned, the silo thinking, which is still apparent in most policymaking and in professional fields. So that, for building owners, integrated solutions could be offered by general, integrated companies. And then in the end, of course, educating and empowering the consumer on ENEFIRST. That's again regarding the multiple benefits, the thermal comfort it can bring, and yes. Last but not least, the key takeaways. So breaking the silos of policymaking and implementation is really important, so that supply and demand side resources can be considered jointly. The energy system models as the basis to determine to look at and assess different scenarios, and in the end determine which scenarios are most cost effective in the long term. considering all societal benefits is key to implement the concept. And where possible, all multiple impacts need to be considered of the different investment options and decisions, and implementing or enabling these complementary measures as preconditions to ensure that all end-use energy efficiency and other options are considered on a fair basis. Right. So I would hand back to Sebastian for any questions. And yeah, maybe just to say, we are now working on the analysis of the national implementation in the 3 countries, Germany, Hungary, and Spain, as I mentioned. And our colleagues are still working on EU scenarios and case studies for the quantitative model assessment. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jana. Indeed, there were a few questions that you can see in the chat. One of them was, for example, about the guidelines published by the Commission to know if they were legally binding. So to my knowledge, they are not, as was mentioned in his comment by Michael Hunt, as they are related to a recommendation from a legal perspective. It means that they are strongly recommended, but not legally binding. But they are referred in the proposed EED request, which means that indeed they are strongly recommended. There was another question about whether we identified good practices in terms of municipal heat and renovation planning. And about that, I answered that we have later on a presentation about Gothenburg, but I don't know if you want to add something on that, Jana.
No, I think there are a lot of examples now. I know in Germany there are a lot of municipal energy plans, especially for heating, just set up. But I think that's always the question how they really consider also the demand side and the building side. So yeah, I think we do look forward to hear the presentation of Lars in a minute. But yeah, I'm not aware of another example there.
Okay. There was also a question from Yanis Falas. I see his name in the chat now, but in Teams, his name is Thesis. It was about barriers to biomaterials for insulation, I think, for buildings. And yeah, probably that's a comment that of a discussion that we had earlier in ENEFIRST. Probably the discussion on biomaterials is more related to life cycle approach or life cycle assessment, which is not exactly the same approach as energy efficiency first, which still remains focused on the energy used during the operation of the buildings mostly. So that's not really yet linked to LCA, life cycle assessment, that could also make it even more complex, while already some stakeholders find it a bit complex. And there was a last...
Maybe just
yes,
to add, it's because the life cycle assessment approach and the whole life carbon debate that's now starting and ongoing on EU level, I think that needs to be complementary if we have the climate neutrality target in mind. And also, I remember in the EU Commission recommendation, it also is mentioned, I think twice or 3 times, that the life cycle assessment and the embodied carbon also needs to be taken into account in a complementary measure.
Exactly,
so
yes.
Shouldn't forget.
Thanks, Jana. And the last comment was about the legal mechanism in case utility would delay the deployment of smart meters, time of use dynamic tariffs, etc. So here, the answer I've made, it's mostly related to the national regulations for energy markets. There are some provisions in the electricity directive and so on. We can come back to that if you want at the end of in the open discussion, but it's a bit a specific question. And as time is running, because we started a bit late, I suggest we move to the next presentation. Thanks a lot, Jana, for your presentation. And now we travel to Zagreb in Croatia with Vesna Bukarica from the Croatian Energy Institute, who will present us about the Croatian renovation program. Vesna, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jean-Sebastian, and good day to everyone. So I will just use some time to share my presentation, and I hope you see it now.
Yes, we see it.
Okay,
that's perfect. In full screen, you can go.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yes, I will briefly introduce you this afternoon with national renovation programs in Croatia and how energy efficiency first principle was or was not applied in these programs. So just a brief introduction, and then the focus will be on residential buildings, single-family house and multi-apartment buildings renovation programs in that segment so far, building stocks, and finally try to come up with some lessons learned from our 7 years of experience in running these programs. So just as an intro, a little bit about energy consumption in Croatia and about our building stock. So basically, as you see on the right side is final energy consumption in Croatia, where you see that more than 1/3 goes to households. And if we add up here services, this means that buildings in Croatia consume almost half of energy consumption in final energy. When we look at the building stock, then our distribution is on this left-hand side, and you see that 50% of our building stock is actually in single-family houses. And the other 27% is in multi-apartment buildings. And what is also maybe different than from Western or Northern Europe is that residential buildings are really in private ownership of residents. So this is also one specificity that we do have here. So these graphs and this data actually shows why why the focus of energy efficiency policy in Croatia is exactly on buildings, and it is the period from 2014 until 2020 that we will look into a little bit more details today. So in this period, so starting in 2014, government has adopted the several programs for energy renovation of buildings. So the first one is focused on single-family houses, and in the first periods, all programs, just let me say immediately that all programs are grant-based. So state is providing grants from public sources to building owners. So back to single-family houses, we started in period 2014 until 2016 with co-financing from National Energy Efficiency Fund, and this co-financing was even up to 80%, depending where the building is located. The program continued in 2020 with 60% co-financing rate. So Slight changes were introduced, but more details will follow on that. Multi-apartment building, similar situation. So the program adopted in 2014. Grants from National Fund were actually also up to 80%, but in reality they were up to 40% because 80% goes only to rural areas, and multi-apartment buildings we do have only in urban areas. And after 2016, we started using European structural and investment funds, and grants up to 60% of investment were possible from that source. Also in public buildings, we had programs. First one was focused on stimulating ESCO model for central government buildings dominantly, and the second was also using grants from European structural and investment funds, in particular from European Regional Development Fund. Subsidies were also up to 60%. So, as I said, I will focus today on residential sector and give you details on these programs related to energy efficiency first principle. So, when we started implementing this program for single-family houses, there were actually no conditions for buildings to apply for grants. When I say no conditions, this means that buildings, that year of the building, that energy class, energy performance certificate of the building, it was not conditioned, so anyone could apply. And also there were no obligatory measures prescribed for houses. So basically owners could choose what they're going to implement on their house and for what they can receive grants. So basically house owners could apply only for walls or only for change of windows, I mean thermal insulation of walls. Or only to replace their existing gas boiler with gas condensing boiler, or to introduce solar thermal heating. So basically, this was this selection was free. Of course, there were technical conditions between each and every of this measure that needed to be fulfilled, but that's another matter. So in this kind of system, in 2014 and 2015, we implemented this kind of public calls for co-financing. You see that more than 12,000 projects were implemented with state grants, and these grants amounted to approximately 80 million euros. Dominantly, people used these available grants for improving their building envelope, as you may see on these pictures. But then again, these were usually single measures. So, for instance, in this building, only thermal insulation of walls, and only minority of projects included integral approach, meaning implementation of both measures on building envelope and on heating systems. So this is. So after that, the program was amended. it took quite a long time due to many of reasons to update the program and start implementing it again in 2020. But these amendments introduced some changes in the conditions for applying. First of all, we introduced that only worst performing buildings could apply for subsidies. This means that according to a class given in energy performance certificate, those needed to be in D or worse in continental part of Croatia, or C or worse in coastal part of Croatia, because there is a difference about according conditions and classes according to these climate zones. We still didn't introduce any conditions for minimal energy savings to be achieved, and no obligatory measures were introduced, but some measures are abandoned. For instance, gas condensing and fuel wood pyrolytic boilers were no longer subsidized due to decarbonization and air pollution reasons. And measures on heating systems on renewables were eligible, but they could only be implemented in combination with measures on building envelope, meaning these changes introduced the principle that first you need to reduce your energy demand by implementing measures on building envelope, and then or in parallel with that you can introduce changes in your technical systems. So there were more than 7,000 applications on this public call in 2020, and co-financing was awarded for more than 3,000 projects. So yes, maybe you can conclude that the drop in number of projects is significant, considering that previous slide I showed, and these 12,000 projects, but still this is for Croatian circumstances impressive number. And still the majority of contracts were only for building envelope measures. So maybe we did introduce or strengthen, I would say, this energy efficiency first principle, but still we are not gaining many projects that do everything at the same time. So what will happen also now, in just few days, there will be new public call for co-financing again. Again, some changes are introduced. So worst performing buildings, according to this D or C, depending where they're located. So for the worst performing buildings, now the co-financing will be possible only for individual measures on building envelope, for combination of at least one measure on building envelope and renewable systems, and it will not be possible to implement only renewable measures. But at the same time, we also included better performing buildings in the scheme, and for them they could only gain financing for renewable measures on heating systems. So this is the story of our single-family houses in the previous period. We are now in the process of adopting new program for period until 2030. And in that program, we will again allow individual measures to be implemented, and this is the should I say political reason or some other word? I'm not sure, but this remains as a possibility is in the program due to concern that those that have already implemented something on their building, for instance, they have only changed windows, so not to push them to change windows again. We will now I don't know, allow them only to insulate walls or only to insulate roof or something. So it's a kind of concern on public opinion and acceptance of the program. But if individual measures are implemented, that co-financing rate will be reduced. Again, worse performing buildings will have to implement at least one measure on building envelope, but better performing buildings may only implement renewable energy systems in their houses. What we would like to stimulate is deeper energy renovation. So we are introducing conditions for obtaining certain higher levels of co-financing. So if building reduces its heat demand for at least 50%, then it will obtain 60% co-financing. So this will require actually to insulate walls and change windows. To give an example, so to implement more than one measure on building envelope. And if you achieve this 50% reduction of demand, reduction of your needs, and if you also reduced your primary energy consumption at least 50%, then you can obtain 80% of co-financing, which is huge. You see that we have huge co-financing rates. So, but this is the way to stimulate implementation of both building envelope and heating system measures at the same time. And we go even step further if NZEB standard, so if nearly zero energy standard is obtained after reconstruction, that then 85% of co-financing is will be possible to achieve. So we'll see how it goes. Another example are multi-apartment buildings, and just again a little bit of history. Until 2016, co-financing 40, 60 or 80%, and we renovated 430 buildings with that. It was just the start of the program, and from the start we introduced the minimal required savings of at least 30% as a condition for obtaining co-financing. And actually, I will now skip to next slide briefly to show you that actually in that first call, in that first attempt with 30% threshold, we gained this kind of projects, and analysis of projects actually showed that heating demand can be reduced significantly more than 30%. So let me go back. In period after 2016, this requirement was indeed increased to at least 50%. And in that period, co-financing rate was also increased to 60%. As I said, we used the European structural and investment funds, and the result is 500 more than 500 renovated buildings. What I need to say here is that both building envelope and technical systems measures were eligible. However, most of the projects included only building envelope. So this integral approach is not really embraced. So what is ahead of us? Very similar to single family houses. So in new program, yesterday just ended public discussion on new program. This condition of at least 50% reduction of heat demand remains, and the co-financing will remain to be 60% for achieving this. But again, we are stimulating in the same manner deeper renovation and even more renovation for achieving nearly zero standard. And I show you this example because these conditions are actually replicated also in non-residential buildings programs. We in those buildings also from the start we introduced at least 50% reduction of heating demand, heating needs, for which actually building envelope measures must be implemented. So what were the lessons learned? Well, this was the hardest slide for me to put, and well, one lesson learned is that it was easier for multi-apartment buildings when we started with some condition. We started with condition of 30%, then we increased it to 50%, and it's easier. There were no problems for that. In single family houses, there is always that problem. What if someone already did something? Now we are punishing them, so they will not be able to achieve this 50%. So we will not prescribe it. So it's a public policy issue and weighting of pro and cons. I don't know, but anyhow, in all processes, we need to communicate. We needed to communicate all and always explain why some conditions are introduced. And as you may noticed, we do try to implement energy efficiency first, but we would like to see more integrated projects. So more projects which will actually renovate building at the same time, tackling both building envelope and technical systems inside the building, So this is something which we will now try to stimulate you through higher co-financing rates, but that's not the end of it, because we are facing also new challenges ahead of us, not ahead of us, they're here already, and that's integration of another aspects in building renovation. One of these aspects are e-mobility and green infrastructure integration into the buildings, and moreover, very specific recently for Croatia, we will also try to include construction safety or seismic safety into renovation of buildings due to earthquakes that we had a year ago. So that's it. That's it. I hope you got the impression what is the situation in Croatia. Happy to answer any questions. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Vesna. That was indeed very interesting, and especially the fact that the energy performance requirements were supported by the achievements from the project in the previous period. I think also that gives confidence to the policymakers that it's possible. Unfortunately, we are a bit running against time. There are a few comments for you in the chat. If you could answer them directly in the chat, that would be super nice.
No.
I'm sorry for the connection,
no
but
problem.
we are a bit running.
Of course.
And last quiz from the Gothenburg Energy Utility, if you want to continue. So now we are traveling to Sweden in Gothenburg, and discussing a connected topic, the topic of municipal energy planning.
Thank you very much, Sebastian.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. As you might see here, it's already dark up here in the far north. Just see if I can share my slide.
Yes, we see them.
Yep. Do you see them in the right mode as well?
Not yet in full screen.
No, it shouldn't be full screen.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm just try to be as quick as possible to say a few words about how we do energy planning in Gothenburg and how we try to expand the energy first principle in the meaning that we also say something about what comes second and first, which I think is important if you're going to have a resource and energy efficient society as a whole, not only the buildings. Just a quick word about Gothenburg. It's a very typical European city with 500,000 people, close to the water. And as we're not the capital of Sweden, that's Stockholm, we're of a more industrial focus than administrative. So we use more energy in the city metabolism than a capital would. And as many cities around, we're also quite unique in some contexts. And one of them is quite important, I think, in this context, is that the heating systems in Sweden mostly are focused on district heating, which means that we use very little gas or individual boilers at all, because we use other means of supplying the district heating system, which supplies almost all multifamily houses in Gothenburg. The remaining 20% of the homes are one single family houses, which we have a much smaller market share, but still district heating is important there as well. And we try to use district heating to use as much recovered heat as possible. This is Gothenburg as well, but from a utility company or local planner perspective. Some people say it's a messy picture, but they're very wrong, because it's a very simplified picture of a mess, which is a city, which is not really sustainable. We have houses that use too much energy. We have various activity that produce waste, that have losses, etc., etc. And what we do as a utility company is using our infrastructure, the electricity grid, the gas grid, the district heating grid, and district cooling, in order to minimize the losses and do the best we can in this mess that is a living city. And an important part of that is the district heating system that has helped us in many ways. I don't think we'll have time to go too far into this, but a lot of challenges has been addressed through the district heating system, like reducing air pollution by just removing lots of chimneys, diversifying energy supply in order to adapt to oil crisis in the 70s, adapt to climate change by switching from fossil fuels to biomass, and at all the time increase resource efficiency in terms of using waste heat as much as we can. We also use the district heating system to harness the volatile power system, because in the system we have both say combined heat and power plants that can produce electricity when that's needed, and we have heat pumps that can use electricity when they have a surplus of heat. And energy planning then is something that we have been doing since the 70s, and it's mandated by law. And historically, it has to do about the oil crisis, just how much of supply should a city have in order to manage shortage of supply, similar to what we see today. But I don't think we have seen situations like we have right now since the 70s, really. So it's a really new ground, or a déjà vu, depending on how old you are, really. But the legislation is it's not very stringent, I would say, because it's mandated that we should do one, but there are no consequences if a city doesn't do one. And there are also no rules on just what should a plan include. That leads to interesting things, really, but only people that want to do an energy plan do it, and the other ones just don't. So we don't have a massive amount of bad plans. I think the most important challenge for a city to do energy planning is that the level of control in many aspects is not that large, because we have a lot of private initiatives that aren't covered by the city, and most of the legislation is national or EU legislation. So you have to do what you can with what you have, which is in some context not that much. In Gothenburg, as in many cities, we have used the energy plan as a way of concretization of the recently adapted environment and climate program. So security of supply is not in focus, although there are elements as well about security of supply, especially how the capacity of the electric grid. The main targets in the environmental program is that the district heating system should have no fossil fuels or the local power productions. Right now we have like 1% fossil fuel in the district heating system, so it's not that much of a challenge. What is a challenge is that it's been decided that we should save, the city should save, the city excluding transport and excluding industry should save 35% of primary energy per capita from 2010 to 2030, and also huge reduction in CO2 from transport. And the plan involves mainly 49 various actions in 9 categories, such as transport, such as greening the district heating grid or increasing district cooling, etc., etc. The actions themselves have quite short time span. The program goes to 2030, and all the targets are around 2030, but the actions only cover the next couple of years. I think there are no action going beyond 2025. So this is meant to be a living document that should be updated every 2 years, adapting to the very swift changes in the energy system. And it also includes a good description of how the energy system works, which I think is very informative. And it also includes some guiding principle, and one of those is the energy first principle on a systemic level, which we call the energy hierarchy. Those of you who have been working with waste hierarchy recognizes the shape of it, but the principle that not only energy efficiency goes first, but you can't reduce demand indefinitely. You have to somehow supply energy as well normally. Then there's a hierarchy as well, that if you have waste energy around you, processes that have losses, you should go there first before you go to using primary energy. I think it's been in a study that the energy losses in Europe's power industry and other industry, the heat losses there are larger than the total heat demand in Europe. So there are huge amounts of waste energy available, especially in a city with large industries nearby. But when the waste energy isn't enough, go for renewables first and only then use fossil fuels. It's been, I don't think well, maybe we've invented it, but it's been invented parallel in a few other cities. I've nicked these from various energy plans from other cities, but it's still early days and it hasn't been standardized yet. Should this ladder go up or down or things like that? So there's still room for improvement and room for standardization before this becomes as common as the waste hierarchy, I would say. But I would say that it's a very useful tool in order to better understand difficult questions. I just, from the top of my head, listed some system where I think this energy ladder, as we might call it, can be a help. The general answer of questions like this is, of course, it depends. But by using this energy ladder, you can actually get help to find sensible answers, like how much can be saved in the production phase by using energy efficiency. Just to having those two dimensions and compare them has been quite important. And also, how can we find more waste heat, and if we adapt the temperature levels in the district heating system? And there's a lot of discussion on-site production of electricity, and I think what's the best way to use that is an important thing for us, because we see that, not least in the EPPD directive, there's a tendency of saying that it's a better thing to use on-site production in the building rather than export it to the grid. But we have come out to the conclusion that it's much better to use as low quality energy carrier as we can for the needs of the house, like heating, and then try to export as much of the on-site electricity produced, because on-site production has no inherent value in itself. It's the bad production elsewhere that has a benefit for the system. I think I'll stop there. I'll save some time. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Lars, for the very interesting presentation. I think that's quite complementary and also very useful to put the principle in a let's say broader context of the energy system as a whole, and also thinking about the connection with the other options on energy supply. And about that, I don't know, maybe if you can put back your last slide, Lars, because we have the pleasure also today to have in the audience Gwendalina Bettinini from the Milan's municipality, and maybe she can also share another experience from the city point of view, from Italy, probably with a configuration settings that are a bit different from Gothenburg. So I don't know, Gwendalina, if you want to say a few words.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thank you for all the presentation. They were very interesting. And so has Gothenburg, for example, also Milan has been developing district heating, I would say, for the last 20 years. And for example, in 2011, thanks to district heating, I would say about 70,000 tons of CO2 emissions were avoided. And also right now with the Recovery and Resilience National Plan, Milan is trying to develop other district heating system in in the city, and also renewables and energy efficiency in several buildings, for example, a lot in social housing, I would say, and in schools, and as well in private buildings, even if it's also a bit difficult there. Milan in the last year had developed a sustainable energy action plan, which has now been a bit revised, and Milan is now under voting for the air and climate plan, the new one, and one of the pillars is for sure decarbonization. And the main objective of the city of Milan are CO2 emissions reduction by 45% by 2013, and becoming a carbon neutral city in 2050. Then also another objective is the identification of a strategy for a new production of thermal energy, and also for the profound energy requalification of buildings, both private and public, as I said before, and also the promotion of the use of renewable sources through the development of energetic community agreements. On this, we also have a European project which is going on. It's called Energy to Peers, and it has right now a pilot case study in a small district in the periphery of Milan. And so, yes, this is the starting point of new energy communities that Milan would like to implement in the future. And also another objective is the definition of a strategy for the efficiency of electrical uses in the tertiary sector as well, which is one of the main in Milan. So yes, I don't know if I have so much time, but it's fine. Thank you.
But okay, to make the connection between the two cases, do you have also the same approach to consider wasted in between energy efficiency and renewables? Let's say, for example, what do you think about the energy ladder or the energy hierarchy concept that was presented by Lars?
Yeah, for now, I think we don't have this implementation in Milan, but it's nice. I think we can. It was nice to see also other approaches. I think it's a bit different, Milan and Gothenburg also. I mean, for the national situation and geographical differences. But yes.
And Lars, coming back to you, there are a few questions. There is one from Michaela Valentova. To know who are the owners of the district heating supply, and maybe that can also be then a question for Gwendolina, because it might, and to what extent who is the owner of the district heating affects the municipal energy planning.
Alltså we as Göteborg Energi, the utility company, we own the district heating infrastructure, the grid, which is maybe the most valuable issue. And we also own production plant that produce some 20-25% of the energy, one CHP plant and a couple of biomass boilers. But the rest of the energy we buy from mainly two refineries in Gothenburg. And also a waste-to-energy plant, which is also owned by the public sector, but not by us. It's a separate company.
And you think that depending on whether it is, let's say, municipally owned or contracted to the private sector, that might change the way to integrate district heating in the local energy planning?
I think it helps, to some extent with public ownership, because with it comes usually a fairly long-term view of the finance. We're a business, and so we make money. So that's no difference, but we have a long-term perspective, and also in terms of pricing, because our owners are also our customers. So we naturally need to have responsible pricing strategies. But if you compare other cities in Gothenburg, because there are some different owner structures out there, like Stockholm, which has a 50% ownership between the city and a separate company, whereas in Malmö, the third largest city in Sweden, is owned by E.ON. And I wouldn't say the strategies are fundamentally different, no.
Okay.
We're proud of our system, but it's not necessarily that you need to have a municipality-owned company, but it helps.
And the situation in Milan, is the district heating owned by the city, or?
I think it's a bit like, so the city owns the district heating system, but at the same time, the district heating system that have been implemented in the past years, I think they have been implemented from the enterprise, from a municipal utility enterprise. So yeah, it's like for now. And for example, in Italy, the energy sector has been privatized, I think 2 years ago. So it's something that it's going on, the privatization of the district, like of the energy sector in general, I would say. So I don't know what will happen in the future, probably.
Okay. And there is a quick technical question for you, Lars, from SP, so I don't know the full name. What is the primary energy factor for the district heat network for use in the building energy calculation? Do you know that? Or?
Yes, according to our standards, I don't know the standard that you referred to, but we usually the primary energy factor is around 0.2.
Okay.
Meaning we've got about 80% waste energy.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. And there is another question, and I think it can be for the two of you. That's from Tennis, but his real name is Yanis Falas from Greece. Is the district heating company involved through co-financing or other approach in the energy efficiency improvements of buildings? Is it an approach that you have seen, or in Gothenburg or in Milan?
If I can start from Gothenburg, we do what we call energy services as a business, but we don't help our customers invest in insulation and what you call it, fabric. But we do, which seems like a very nice concept. But we do help our customers in various ways. We're helping them run their installations properly, and sometimes we take care of them and sell heat for a fixed price, 20 degrees indoors, and pay per month, and then we get an incentive to save energy as well.
Okay.
But that's an extra.
Yeah, that's the energy service support, but that's very interesting indeed. And Gwendolina, you were also.
Yes, I've been working in the future projects that Milan is implementing for the energy efficiency of buildings, and yes, like the district heating companies is also involved in these improvements.
Okay. And I guess it helps also to have a large stock of buildings in social housing or schools, as you said earlier. So thank you very much. I won't take more of your time because we are already quite late compared to the initial schedule to the technical problem at the beginning. Thanks a lot, Vesna, also for answering the comments in the chat. So I encourage all the participants to look at that. I don't know, Vesna, if you want to say a concluding remark, or if you want to add something to the comments you have put in the chat.
No, I think everything is answered. Yeah.
Okay, and thanks again, Janu, also for presenting the latest ENEFIRST report. I encourage you to visit our website, and later in the week, we will put the recordings available on the website together with the presentation of the speakers. We thank you very much for joining today, and again, very sorry for the problem at the beginning, and we hope to see you in next ENEFIRST activities. Hopefully that will run more smoothly. Have a very nice evening, and we see you soon. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.